Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today, I will be starting a series of reviews. I think this will probably have to happen over 3 reviews, where I look at the newly released collection of Chris Ware's sketchbooks, the Acme Novelty Library date books. These are, I think, the only collection of Ware stuff, at least, that I don't have to this point. I don't have all the individual Acme Novelty libraries, but I think I've got all of the other major collections of his stuff. Never seen the sketchbooks though, so was pretty excited to get this. I'm always a little bit leery about buying sketchbooks, but Chris Ware in a nice big box set like this, I had to check it out. You see on the inside of the box here that there's even some more of his diagrammatic drawings. And the thing that I thought looked extra cool about this box set that will have me keeping the box versus a lot of times when I buy box sets, it's just a convenient way to get it, but I don't really want the box. This one has this cool little like clock built into it. So that I think is a really nice feature of the box. Probably not as much narrative or even more abstract or obscure narrative than normal from Ware on the sides of everything. But of course, Chris Ware is filling up every little bit of space he can. So that's the box that this comes in. And then we get to the first book here. Actually, we'll put the second book down for the back cover because the format on all of these is pretty much the same, with his little god Superman character as the clock. Then on the back you have about the author, which if you know Chris Ware, he's always writing a whole bunch of stuff in really, really small print, usually self-deprecating. So there's a self-deprecating about the author back there, changing as we go to keep up with him getting older. So you see the hair's gotten even grayer. I'm sure there's even more hair on this one. And then this is like a timeline from, well, they both say 1998, but there's a timeline here that goes through like different events in Ware's life or different events in the world that he thinks are important or interesting. Again, a lot of them are just self-deprecating, trying to be funny about it. So this first volume is collecting 1990 or 1986 through 1995. So kind of like the most intense, I would think, 9-year period of production for him, like while he was really coming to his own as a comic artist, getting known, putting out his first few books. So for me, this holds a lot of interest along those lines. There's a lot of extra comic strips in here, a lot of extra like potato guy strips, a lot of extra Quimby the Mouse strips, some planning for Jimmy Corrigan, stuff like that that's really interesting. So you get that even starting right away in the end papers, and as typical with Chris Ware, a lot of stuff's really, really tiny. Now that I'm getting older, this is getting a little more frustrating because some of the writing was getting too small, and then because it's all being printed in color, the line work on this is getting a little hard to read as well with his little tiny line work, especially when it's on something like this on black. It's a little bit hard to read in places, but pretty typical all around kind of Chris Ware aesthetic. You have like all of the little jokey handwritten indicia stuff, the gratitudes, the any of this like copyright information's all handwritten and trying to be jokey. Starts out right away with the standard Chris Ware self-hatred, the introduction here, which is of course a comic made specially for this. And he's going into like everything that is wrong with all of the sketchbooks, all the way through the most recent one. You know, it never really goes away in his work. The self-deprecation, the self-hatred, the people shouldn't be looking at this type of stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. And if you follow this channel at all, you know I don't really have much patience for that kind of thing, especially in comics where cartoonists are sitting around complaining about the life that they've built for themselves. And these sketchbooks, unfortunately, are chock full of that kind of stuff. which doesn't surprise me for Chris Ware, but also is unfortunate that he wastes so much of his powerful brain on that because there's so much else in there. So we'll just be going through these. Maybe I can do these all in one video. Maybe we'll break them up. But just pointing out the things that I think are interesting, the things that I felt were worthwhile in the books, leaving that criticism hanging for all of them. Right here we get some of this very early Quimby Mouse stuff. You get to see some different material explorations. This looks like maybe color pencil over top of markers, or color pencil over top of watercolors. Maybe this is all pastels, I'm not sure, but some Quimby the Mouse stuff. You get some just sketching of the cityscape around Chris Ware, wherever he's at the time. I also really like that in this one, he's somehow, for some reason, chopped this hole into his sketchbook that's showing up on pretty much all the pages in here, which is kind of fun. I also like that he'll, like on this page, it looks like he's painted the whole page black with the black ink or something, and then is drawing on it with white. That looks physical because you've got all the physical aspects of the page still showing up. So fun. I mean, this is like a young Chris Ware playing and trying things out, and that to me is the most compelling part of what's going on. Also, to see him, this is like when you see Picasso drawing as a kid, and you see how well they can do within the realm of realism, and then you see where they've gone with the abstraction, or like the trying to push the idea more, and it's a really interesting comparison. So seeing some early figure drawing and a really, really lovely portrait here really catches like something about the model spirit as well. Like I kind of feel like I know this person. This little strip right here is the first time I see evidence in the books, at least presented here, of the type of infographic flowchart type of thing that Chris Ware is so famous for and brought to the language of comics. That, I mean, really, it's so tied to him that a lot, like hardly anyone else touches it. You can't touch it without being associated with Chris Ware, which is unfortunate because it's such a great way of thinking. But this is the first time in the sketchbooks, at least, that I see evidence of that. So it's cool to see him playing with it. And this, it looks a little bit more like Jason Shiga's Meanwhile or something like that, a little clumsier version of a multi-directional comic. But it's good to see that developing because we all know where that goes with his work. And then the page, couple of pages, the very next page after that, there's a note here where he's talking about Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest kid on earth. With this machine, we'll be able to track this entire memory like a map. I don't know if that says machine. It's hard to read what he's putting in there. But he's talking about track his entire memory like a map. And then he wrote, why do objects take on peculiar resonance? And then he drew a key and says the key to your cartooning success. So something about this right here was like the key to his success. And I thought it was really interesting that that came right after what looks to me like the breakthrough of what makes Chris Ware's cartooning different than everyone else's. The like multi-linear little maps that he does really inform everything within his work, I think. And then within the page, he's talking about Jimmy Corrigan and the key to his cartooning success. So I'm not sure if that's what he meant, but I found that to be interesting. These are nice books, as you can see, with ribbons. Nice, really nicely printed and bound books. The only thing, like I said, that's a little funky about the printing is because these are facsimile reproductions of his sketchbook, and the sketchbook has a lot of color in it, it didn't make sense for them to go back and like treat the line work as line work. And since Chris Ware has such tiny little writing, the dots do show up in the writing, and the writing gets a little fuzzy. And if you're someone who's trying to go read every note, that could be irritating. I pretty much stuck to reading the strips and like scanning the notes for words that jumped out. Really like this right here, where he's just given himself obviously a challenge of coming up with a bunch of different faces. Like that seems to be a good challenge for cartoonists. Derive a bunch of variety of faces from some small set of shape components, or like here, everyone seems to have these big like wrinkles in their brow. So I just seeing what he's doing to try and get better. These little challenges that it looks like he's given himself are very interesting to me, because it's like, oh, those are things I could work on to get better. And then seeing this like scatter of ideas, this more nonlinear approach to thinking, continue to develop in his sketches. At first, it almost looks like he's just trying out different things, but then trying out the different tracks seems to be opening up the way he's thinking. And then you can also see that he's planning on how to represent this stuff three-dimensionally, catalog of an exhibition, things like that. So really starting to put comics into that three-dimensional realm. It's pretty obvious when something awful happens in Chris Ware's life, like a breakup. The cartooning gets really depressed, more so than normal, and he's dealing with that in all of his cartoons. You see here we've got Jimmy Corrigan, we've got the Adventures of God, so his repertoire of characters is developing. He's already got the mouse and the potato guy, now he's got these two. Some really fun little teeny tiny cartooning here that's being done in red and blue, and so we've got red and blue in the lettering as well. Just any kind of cool little thing like that to see his material play is nice. And then seeing a page like this where there's some style play, so there's some other artist and some other approach that he's obviously been looking at. This looks to me like very advertising art type of cartooning, so like painting the page gray so he can draw on top of the gray and get these little whited out effects, kind of the Nick at Night, I Love Lucy type of looking illustration. But seeing that Chris Ware is like completely comfortable whether he's drawing a realistic portrait or doing this kind of cartooning or his usual thing, it's just one of those artists where you sit there and be like, God damn, dude, you're so good. And that's why it makes this whole thing where he's complaining about how terrible he is the whole time kind of obnoxious. Here's another one of these like flowchart memory things that he does. This is a much more well-developed version of it. You can see that language developing very clearly in his sketchbook. I wish that there had been, even though there are tabs here, I guess this will kind of tell you where you're at. So like this tab here would be around 92, 93, I think. I think they could have just designed something here like on the tab to tell you, or on the bottom of the page. This first volume is really, really nice in that it has a lot of basically B-sides or discarded strips, things like that, where Chris Ware is working with the characters you're familiar, Big Tex, Quimby the Mouse, Jimmy Corrigan, but trying out strips or just doing strips like warm-up strips, things like that. So you get a lot more comic content in this first volume that relates to the properties you're used to with him. So that's a really nice extra feature, a fun thing in there. And then, yeah, getting that variety of like seeing his realistic kind of pen and ink style develop. And then quotes. I didn't go through and read everything, but when things stood out to me, I would delve in and kind of scan them to see if anything stood out. So some of the quotes that he puts in are really interesting as well, and develop a little bit clearer idea or confirmation of what it is that Chris Ware's cartooning philosophy is. So here he has a quote from Goethe: "The architecture is frozen music," and then Chris Ware adds, "This is, I think, the aesthetic key to the development of cartoons as an art form." And then he has another quote. I don't know who this is from, maybe Stravinsky, it's hard to tell. But it says, "Music is not expression. Music is the sole domain in which man realizes the present." And that's always, to me, been an obvious part of like how Chris Ware composes. It's a big part of like I'm stealing from him and Guido Crepa in the way that I am composing my new book, Bound, because it's the way that he subdivides, and he'll put, this is like a subdivision of 5 against a subdivision of 3.5 or something like that. So there's these polyrhythmic musical structures in Chris Ware's layouts that, I've always felt are a big component to how he deals with time in his comics, and so that makes sense to me that he was connecting that to very explicitly to a statement about music and architecture, because those are also about subdivision, and if you pay attention to Chris Ware's work at all, you'll see that in there. So that's the take a quick look at the first of the 3 volumes that are collected in this box set, and check back. We'll just do this one a week and check back, and we'll see the next one next week.